Sports professor Rick Horrow, Beyond the Scoreboard, the show that goes inside the trillion-dollar business of sports. And what a week it is. Teams that were one favored, one not, meeting in a rematch of Super Bowl 39, Spygate. Here comes Super Bowl 52 in Minneapolis. We'll cover the economic impact, the business, and all of those issues as we get into this, including some of the issues involved in all other business sports issues, politics, law, deal-making, and the like. Again, NBC Washington for our 15 to watch, plus 15 5 philanthropic, plus 5 technical issues we do every week. If you want to see them in an organized way, obviously we cover some of the big issues, including NFL, including Super Bowl. The two teams, owners not necessarily liking each other. There is a history, if you remember Spygate, and there's also a history of breaking up the dynasty. That'll be the big storyline in Minneapolis, including the economic impact of Minneapolis, and we'll try to cover that this week. We'll also cover it next week. Take a look at the numbers. Eagles are a 5.5-point underdog, the largest since the Cardinals lost to the Steelers years ago. Patriots started off as consensus Super Bowl favorites, about 5-2, and stayed there. The state's regulated sports books have come out ahead 25 of the 27 games since 91. And the book's up to about $173 million. The only big-time losses for them in 08, the Patriots-Giants, and in 95, the Niners-Chargers. And big numbers like these only bolster the efforts by states outside Nevada, led by New Jersey, to sway the U.S. Supreme Court to broaden its sports gaming laws. And by the way, it's not just here. It's across the pond. 2005, the legislation relaxed. The University of Glasgow and Healthy Stadia notes advertising presences of betting companies has risen dramatically. Researchers found 95% of soccer shirt sponsorships with English clubs have been struck since 2005. Gambling now being labeled, get this, across the pond, public health issue. Let's face it, gambling been a norm.
We're going to take a short break, but when we return, more Rick Horrow, the sports professor. Welcome back to Beyond the Scoreboard with Rick Horrow. We pick up right where we left off.
Let's face it, gambling been a norm in global pro sports since there were such things. Regulations, including allowing advertising, help the practice become less harmful, not more so. So bring it on. But let's also remember that if we talk about this stuff as far as the United States is concerned, we also understand that we are small time compared to betting across the pond. Again, if you want to see us, NBC Washington, our 15 to watch, plus our 5 tech, plus our 5 social power sports, go right ahead. In the meantime, let's focus on Super Bowl issues. Next week, we take a virtual tour of Minnesota Vikings U.S. Bank Stadium. We also talk about Jamie Roots, the president of the Houston Texans. A year after his Super Bowl, what that meant there, we can learn something in Minnesota. This week, an anniversary. Bob Greasy, 1972 perfect season, leads the Dolphins in the 1973 Super Bowl almost a year, many years to the day, to a perfect season. He passes for 25,000 yards all told. Pro Football Hall of Fame inductee in 1990. His son Brian, better known for as a broadcaster, but again, another timeless issue is his appearance in the broadcast booth with that icon, Keith Jackson, who died 3 weeks ago. Bob Greasy broke in at Purdue, led the Dolphins to Super Bowl 6, 7, and 8. And obviously he has a lot to say about transition, broadcasting, iconic play, Super Bowl then and now. A lot to talk about, a lot of perspective. Here's Bob Greasy.
Rick Horrow, Beyond the Scoreboard, inside the boardroom. The business of $1 trillion sports industry. And one of the founders of the business, he didn't know that. All he did was end up in the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 1990 and 25,000 yards passing and leading the Dolphins to 2 perfect seasons. But in many ways, he shaped a lot of the business of sports because of his ability to transition from on-the-field success to behind the broadcast booth success, and doing both careers with special alacrity. That means it's pretty good. Bob Greasy, how are you? How's that for an intro?
That's pretty good. They're doing good. Now that the Dolphins won a game, I'm doing much better.
Well, right. This is evergreen, so we may run this before a number of losses, too. But I got to tell you, based on our pregame conversations, nobody expected that. But, we never know. We never know with NFL football generally, plus with this team. So, let's get that out of the way. Where is this team? Where is this team going before the end of the season? Do we know?
I don't think we know. I think the best we can hope for is to win. There's 4 games left. I think the best we can hope for is to win all 4 of those games. 2 are at home and 2 are on the road. We've got New England, the Patriots, coming this Monday. So if we can beat them, we can beat the next 3. And we play Buffalo twice, and we play at Kansas City, and that'll be interesting to be in Kansas City on Christmas Eve, because it was 1971, the longest game in NFL history. Well, the Dolphins were at Kansas City on Christmas Day, and we beat them in double overtime. 2 went into the second quarter, and that game is remembered by Jan Stenerud, who was the kicker for Kansas City. I see every summer when I go to Canton. He's in the Hall of Fame as well, and he still has not gotten over missing a couple field goals that he missed that could have won the game for Kansas City. So they got 4 games left, and I think the best we can hope for is to win 4 and see where the chips fall. We're playing better football, but the problem with this whole season, I think, it started going downhill in the summer when Ryan Tannehill got hurt in practice. Yeah, and
it went downhill from there, and it wasn't anybody's expectations. But that's when you 1-4 last year. Who knew? And 9-7 could get in. But we are thinking of more lofty things. It is interesting that you peg the 1971 Christmas Day game as one of those things where everybody who is old enough to remember, and there are still some of us, remember exactly where we were. Easy for you to remember because that was, if I'm not mistaken, your MVP season, and even though that wasn't the perfect season, it set the stage for the perfect season. That was, as I remember, at Super Bowl VI, and then you win 2 straight other Super Bowls. And, growing up in Miami, reflect back, I know you're asked this millions of times, on the perfect season and how the perfect season can never be taken away from you, and the perfect season may never happen again.
Well, as Coach Shula says, it's just very tough to go undefeated. It's very tough to win every game. Well, the frustrating part about the 71 season and the loss in the Super Bowl was Coach Shula hit it on the nail on the head when he said that the frustrating part was you're going to have to play this 1972 season. You're going to have to play the entire season just to get back to where we were in the Super Bowl in 1971, the one we lost to the Dallas Cowboys. So he already set the tone for the following season. I got hurt in the 5th game. Earl Morrow came in and played very well. Coach Shula had picked Earl up earlier in that 72 season in March, he tried to convince Joe Robbie that, hey, if anything happens to Greasy, we need somebody better to. And Earl Morrow in Baltimore, when Shula was there, he was very confident that Earl was a good player. And so that's what happened. Robbie says, all right, if you think you really need him, I'll find some way to pay him. And so anyway, I get hurt in the fifth game. Earl Morrow comes in. He wins all these games. Earl was not a good practice player. So a lot of the guys on the team were kind of rolling their eyes when Earl had to go in because they seen the way he practiced and wasn't a very good practice player. But when he got in the games, he really delivered. So Earl went, 10 or 11 games, and I was healthy from a dislocated ankle to come back into the championship game, the AFC championship game, and then also come back in the Super Bowl. But so we won 17-0, but there would be no undefeated season without Earl Morrow.
Well, the bigger issue too, as well. Obviously, you're 17-0, and nobody has done it, and I'll say nobody will do it again. And everybody kind of makes fun at the last undefeated team going down and what Mercury Morris has been doing. Growing up in South Florida is a melting pot, and people always come from somewhere else, either from the New York area south or the Havana area north, and everywhere in between. Do you reflect back on what you, in a maybe significant way, did to change the culture, to add to the culture, to really impact the culture of South Florida?
Well, before the Dolphins, the South Florida, Miami, never had a professional team of any sorts. They didn't have the Heat. They didn't have the Marlins. They didn't have...
We're going to take a short break, but when we return, more Rick Horrow, the sports professor. Welcome back to Beyond the Scoreboard with Rick Horrow. We pick up right where we left off.
To really impact the culture of South Florida?
Well, before the Dolphins, the South Florida, Miami, never had a professional team of any sorts. They didn't have the Heat. They didn't have the Marlins. They didn't have the Dolphins. All they had was this rickety old Orange Bowl where the University of Miami played. And once a year they would have the Orange Bowl game there. So when the Dolphins came, that was the first thing everybody just, and it was obviously an expansion team, and the Dolphins didn't win many games. I came in 67, the second year, and we had losing seasons for 3 years, 67, 8, and 9, until Coach Shula came in 1970, and then the whole thing turned around, and that fan base that had been so loyal to losing Dolphin teams in the late 70s were rewarded when Coach Shula came, and then three straight Super Bowls in a row. We won 2 of them, and one of them was a perfect season.
And nobody can take it away from anybody. I just, to reflect back on what it means to South Florida, not just that you get a team, but that South Florida, with all of its racial divides and ethnic stress and all, can look back at something that somebody around South Florida did perfectly. What do you think that means?
Well, I think it means a lot. Because, first of all, no other Dolphin team has done it before. The closest thing that this fan base in South Florida could wrap their arms around, I think, is the Miami Heat, who won the NBA championship. but the Dolphins have been in Super Bowls before and not since then, but not won them. So I think that everybody likes to think back to the Dolphins and when we were dominating the NFL and when we were the perfect season. Everybody loves to talk about the perfect season.
It's great emotionally, it's great psychologically, and when you retired in 1980, people would reflect back on your career that started in 67, and you had other things in mind, I guess. 82, you teamed with Charlie Jones with NBC and called Super Bowl 20, and then with ABC, ESPN, and then back to the Dolphins color. How did you make your mind up to transition from football on the field to broadcasting, and what did you have to do to prepare for your next career?
Well, I came out of Evansville, Indiana. My dad was a plumber. I didn't know that I was going to be able to get a college education. I was a better baseball player than football or basketball, which I played all three sports. We were playing in the American Legion World Series in 1967, the year I went on and went to Purdue. And in the summer before I went to Purdue, a Baltimore Orioles scout comes and wants to sign me as a pitcher to a Baltimore Orioles minor league team. And I said, no, I'm going to Purdue. I'm going to get an education and go on from there. So I didn't have any aspirations of playing professional football. I wanted to just go ahead and get my education and be at Purdue and things happened. We won the Rose Bowl. I had a couple of good years at Purdue. Finished second in the Heisman voting to Steve Spurrier. So it drafted first by the Dolphins. Everything. I majored in industrial management and certainly not broadcasting. So I just came down. I said, all right, I played for the Dolphins for 14 years and coached 1 year with Coach Shula. And then he said, I walked after that was over with. I walked in and said, here's your playbook. I'm finished. He says, oh, no. He says, you got to do this. He says, you love this coaching business. I said, yeah, but I love my 3 kids more. So after that, then NBC came to me and wanted to know if I was interested in broadcasting. And I said, well, yeah, I'll try that. I could spend a lot more time with my kids during the week than you would being a coach in the NFL. So that's how I got into it. And the first 5 years I did with NBC and did the NFL, and then the next 25 years I did college games. The first half with Keith Jackson and then Brad Nessler and then a whole bunch of other guys.
Well, so obviously the transition was something that you were able to do, I wouldn't say fairly easily, but the kind of industrial engineering background and makeup, you're a very analytic person. You'll throw 7 passes and win a game and go undefeated. You'll transition into broadcasting. What's the biggest skill or the easiest skill you can identify in your world that were kind of common to both on-field success and broadcasting success from your perspective?
Well, I think growing up in southern Indiana, my dad died. He was a plumber, and my dad died when I was 10. My mother had to go to work as a secretary. Little League baseball was big to me. All I wanted to do was go to school, grade school at first, and then afterwards find some kind of athletic thing to do, baseball or basketball. Didn't have football back then as organized in any way. So I just wanted to do the best I can. I was very competitive. Competitive on the athletic environment, and then also competitive in the classroom. I remember back in grade school, the teacher would stand everybody up in the back of the room, and we'd have a spelling contest, and I damn sure wanted to win that contest. Well, if you spelled a word wrong, you had to sit down, and I definitely was the last person standing more often than not. So I would say, the competition, the competitiveness, I wanted to do the best I can. And in this business about throwing 7 passes or 10 passes or 12 passes, we won those games. And I called the plays. If I wanted to be the MVP of the Super Bowl, I could have thrown 25 or 30 passes, but that's not what we needed to do to win. Our strength was Zaka and Kick and Mercury Morris and the offensive line. I feel badly, and I told Paul Warfield this. He was one of the best wide receivers to ever play in the National Football League, but he didn't get a chance to show his real skills because we didn't throw that much. Like you said, we threw 7 balls, but we won the Super Bowl. So that's kind of where I come from. It's not about me. It's about the team.
And clearly that's the way it's been consistently for you, too. Just a couple more. From the broadcasting perspective, you've been in it for years, and you can reflect back on how things have changed. From a business, I guess, of broadcasting perspective, what's the biggest change you've seen since you broke in 1982? Is it social media? Is it, the need to get something done quickly? Just kind of give me your perspective on the last 30 years and what the biggest change in the media broadcasting business has been.
Well, definitely social media is part of it. And then I think the technology of, way back, it first started as black and white, and they only had 2 or 3 cameras. I think the first Super Bowl, I think it was NBC and CBS, both televised the game. And then after that, they started giving it away to one side or one network or the other. But they didn't have telestrators back then. They didn't have. If you saw it, you may get a replay of a big play, and you may not. So much has happened through the networks and through television, and so the improvement in the trucks.
We're going to take a short break, but when we return, more Rick Horrow, the sports professor. Welcome back to Beyond the Scoreboard with Rick Horrow. We pick up right where we left off.
Really come a long way, and I'd say that's probably the color is much better. The broadcasters are better, but also the telestrators and all the fancy buttons, the whistles and the buttons and all that other stuff that we push nowadays is much better than it was.
Finally, Bob Greasy, the quintessential team player, always willing to share credit. How does it feel when you walk down the street and people remember and recognize your son for both on-field and broadcasting more than you? What do you really think of that? Do You proud of it, or you just want to beat the heck out of it?
Of course, of course, I'm proud of it. Now I'm very proud of it when I'm not around him. When we're together, I'd say, well, first of all, he went to Michigan, and in front of him, I'll say, well, you couldn't get into Purdue, so you had to go to Michigan.
Good answer. Good answer. Well, obviously, the answer is that you have an incredible perspective, both on and off the field, and it's an honor and pleasure to know you and really appreciate your time. Bob Greasy, Rick Horrow, Beyond the Scoreboard. See you in a couple minutes.
Bob Greasy, obviously very interested in what we all do now in the Super Bowl. He is the play-by-play and color analyst of the Miami Dolphins. We'll be up at the Super Bowl 52 to talk about not only the Dolphins and the Vikings, but all of those years, the Purple People Eaters. The Dolphins kind of put them in place for their second Super Bowl win in the 1974 Super Bowl, 1973 season. But yeah, I digress. I understand I'm stuck in a rut, but that's what this is all about. But take a look at some of the other NFL issues. We talked about gambling. We talked about NFL across the pond. But how about some things that are happening directly in Minneapolis? Well, the annual Big Game, Big Event attracts some of the world's biggest celebrities. Shaq. Organizer Mark Pollock talks about his A-list celebrities. Only 500 tickets to the exclusive event. How about this? $3,000 a piece. The Giving Back Fund is the big winner. The event in Edina. Jamie Foxx hosts the event. Novu CEO philanthropist Tom Wicca and his wife Angie. Mark Wahlberg, Shaq, Hilary Swank, Michael Phelps, Joe Montana, rapper, actor Common. The 2017 Big Game, Big Give in Houston, hosted by actor Josh Brolin, raised more than $1 million. This year's goal, $1.3 million. Not just philanthropy there, but how about otherwise? Benjamin Watson of the Ravens, J.J. Watt, obviously the Texans, Panthers tight end Greg Olsen, nominated as the 3 finalists for the Walter Payton Man of the Year. Program distributed more than $3.5 million, for example, Greg Olson's Receptions for Research, the International Justice Mission of Benjamin Watson, the world's largest international anti-slavery organization working to combat human trafficking. Obviously, J.J. Watt and his efforts to raise over $37 million online for Hurricane Harvey. Here's the bottom line. There are no losers. All 3 should win, and we'll see what happens with the honors program in a couple of weeks. And let's remember that the NFL now has $100 million to promote to philanthropic goals. And the bottom line of all of this is they should be in a position to be reveling in some of their achievements, even though people are quick to point fingers. This is good, and it will remain good. How about Colin Kaepernick, by the way? He's almost been forgotten, even though you could say he is the icon that started this movement. He's completing his $1 million pledge to help fight for social justice. A couple of years ago, he pledged to donate $1 million of his own money to organizations fighting for social justice. He's donated $910,000 himself to 31 organizations, completing his pledge by donating the final $90,000 shortly. And each of Kaepernick's final $10,000 donations matched by a celebrity. Kevin Durant is donating $10,000 with a piece to the Silicon Valley Debug, a charitable advocacy organization. He talks about how important it is, people doing good work for support. Kudos to Colin Kaepernick on the field and off the field, clearly putting money where his mouth is. How about John Duranbos, NFL player and magician? He does good for all. Former long snapper of the Eagles and performing magician. How about that? Keynote speaker for the 11th annual St. Thomas Rutherford Society Gala. It's held annually to recognize donors in the foundation. 15 years in the NFL for this man, recently nominated by the Eagles for the Walter Payton Man of the Year award for him. The NFL career ended earlier this year due to a life-threatening heart condition. It was heart-wrenching, and he's an entertainer for over 20 years. He's known as the NFL Magic Man, respectfully referred to as the entertainer's entertainer. 2 Emmys for his television show hosted with the Eagles, and his inspirational life story for triumph over adversity has been retold on national television, HBO, Fox, everywhere. It is good to know he will be around, not just as the long snapper, because that career is over, but how about as an Eagles linchpin to raising more money for charity. Good for him, good for the Eagles. He'll be there, and it's really important. Let's shift to round ball, and first of all, college sports. According to articles in Lexington, and they should know, NCAA President Mark Emmert pledged the collegiate governing body is serious in its response to FBI charges and an investigation that was opened up a few months ago. The Commission on College Basketball is led by Condoleezza Rice, and she's been meeting monthly and hosting regular teleconferences. Adam Silver, retail companies, agents, executives. Emmert says scandals that call into question our commitment to academic integrity make whatever praise we have of our highest graduation rates ring pretty hollow. We have to recognize we can't dance around those things. And as the NCAA basketball creeps closer to its annual cash cow March Madness, look for the association's focus on anything that could mess with its business model to intensify. Round ball, the pro variety. Good news. NBA players and officials agreed to meet next month during the All-Star break to try to find some peace. The current NBA season has been a contentious one for players and officials alike. Neither side happy with the behavior of the other. We say they're being too cocky and arrogant, and they're saying the same thing about us, says Phoenix Suns guard Devin Booker. In the two sides of the story, there has to be a middle, somewhere we can meet. Players upset with officials because they're handing out too many T's for behavior. Star players increasingly vocal about the poor state of officiating this year, spurring talks. And while complaining about calls is practically written into an NBA player's contract, look for NBA Commissioner Adam Silver, equipped with world-class negotiating skills, to intervene. Probably a good time for him to do it, and probably successful as he does it. No deadline, but this is the right time for this kind of stuff to get done. One more thing about basketball, and it is philanthropic. Kyle Lowry pledged $1 million to a Villanova campaign. He's a 3-time NBA All-Star, and his wife, Hannah, has shown their gratitude by making $1 million pledge to the university's capital campaign. 2016 Olympic gold medalist, he recruited Nova out of Cardinal Daughtry High School. Men's basketball team and locker room renovated as the Kyle Lowry men's basketball locker room. It's not just philanthropic, it's giving back to schools, and a very good thing. How about soccer? Well, the Columbus Crew making closer progress for stadiums, yet they're talking about Austin, Texas. The new stadium site is 3 potential options. They're looking at moving for the 19 season, since Columbus Mayor Andrew Ginther noted back in October the city would not consider using public money to fund a new soccer-specific stadium. The 3 sites are all over Austin. No clarity over the matter expected till mid-February. But the team seems intent on relocating. Crew fans have started the hashtag Save the Crew movement to keep the club in Ohio. Needs more than a movement, needs a stadium. Speaking of soccer, let's go to the other level. How about the World Cup? President Donald Trump complicating the U.S. bid for the 2026 World Cup. U.S. Soccer President Sunil Gulati who serves as the chair of the North American World Cup bid, believes that political factors are starting to affect the ongoing campaign. This will be a tough battle, he said, not only about our stadiums and our hotels and all of that, but it's also about the perception of America, and it's a difficult time in the world. With Morocco's last-minute entry bid to host the World Cup and Trump's recent comments regarding African nations and immigration, the nation is sure to secure most, if not all, of the support of Africa. And the African FIFA bloc has 54 votes, by the way, just over half of what a bid needs to win hosting rights. U.S. soccer officials further fear that the president's rhetoric could take a toll on support outside Africa as well. We'll just have to see. Finally, let's stay international, though, and let's be positive about the Olympics. We're almost there. NBC goes from Super Bowl to the Olympics, and according to all news agencies, the North and South Koreans have come up with details on how to merge their efforts in certain sports: skating, alpine skiing, cross-country skiing, and women's hockey. They're training at a ski resort in North Korea. It's unbelievable. And it further reflects Seoul's desire to make the Winter Olympics a peace event. But it's not been well received in South Korea. Critics say the training will be used to promote the ski resort, one of North Korea's premier's pet projects. Yeah, but you know what? Diplomacy is all about compromise. And the powerful global statement being made by the North and South Alliance is surely worth a little unabashed resort promotion. Finally, let's go to baseball. I know it's not time, but all the fans of the Nationals and the Orioles, we're talking about it in a way that hard to believe that we're only 3 weeks before pitchers and catchers report. MLB ballparks soon feature contactless ticketing for Apple devices. MLB has a solution as long as you own an Apple device. Tickets.com partnered with technology partner Infinite Peripherals to continue implementing contactless ticketing at more parks. MLB, Athletics, Oakland Coliseum. The A's represented for the first time the Apple Watch that can enter stadiums just by holding the device near receivers at the gate. And those receivers will use the Peripherals' Infinite Mobile Point-of-Sight Blue Pad products to scan the Apple Wallet. How about souvenirs? Well, we don't care about souvenirs, I guess. Paperless.
We're going to take a short break, but when we return, more Rick Horrow, the sports professor. Welcome back to Beyond the Scoreboard with Rick Horrow. We pick up right where we left off.
Arm extends beyond their, let's call it the accelerator model. They have an investment entity that includes a more encompassing studio device, Key Motion. We've had Milton Lee, their founder, on before. It's a company that's able to televise remotely, but now they're getting more funding, and the Global Sports Venture Studio for the Dodgers, retailers, industry vendors, esports, fantasy sports, sports betting, all of that really positive and really continuing to bring baseball to the forefront of technological innovation. Finally, solar power. Petco Park, San Diego, currently constructing a grid 12 million kilowatt hours over the next 25 years. 336,000 watt project will cost around $1 million, but renewable tax credits and more energy hopes the project will be done for opening day by March 29. And final, I know we said final, but the NHL All-Star Game going to Tampa, $40 million economic impact, 8,500 room nights in LA, many more in Tampa, 3-on-3 tournament format. Everybody loves it. Next weekend, the Pro Bowl and the NHL All-Star Game start 10 minutes apart and an hour and a half apart in Tampa and Orlando, respectively. We're going to look at the comparative economics of both of those and how did it happen where they're back to back to back. It'll be really interesting to follow and really interesting to focus on Beyond the Box Score and Beyond the Scoreboard, all of our segments. We'd like to thank you for watching and listening. We'd like to thank Bob Greasley for lending his unparalleled perspective to this. He's a good friend and obviously somebody that very important to the South Florida area as well as the NFL. Join you next week. Talk about hockey, getting ready for the Super Bowl. I'd like to thank Dan Martin and Tanner Simpkins for putting this together. We'd like to thank you guys for listening and watching, and join us next week when we go Beyond the Scoreboard.